Let me be direct with you from the outset. What was revealed yesterday through satellite imagery and Syrian opposition sources is not a small weapons depot. It is not a training camp. What has been operating in complete secrecy 47 kilometers south of Damascus for at least 18 months is a fully integrated Iranian military base with permanent structures, hardened munitions bunkers, advanced air defense systems, and direct fiber optic communication links to Tehran. This is not temporary positioning. This is strategic infrastructure designed for long-term presence that fundamentally alters the security calculus for Israel, Jordan, and American forces operating in the region. I am looking at commercial satellite imagery from Planet Labs dated May 16, 2026 that shows a facility covering approximately 8 square kilometers. What it reveals is not improvised fortifications. What it reveals is engineered military infrastructure, including 14 hardened aircraft shelters, 22 ammunition bunkers built to Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps specifications, a 2,400-meter runway capable of handling transport aircraft, barracks facilities for at least 800 personnel, and a sophisticated air defense network featuring what appear to be Bavar 373 long-range surface-to-air missile systems. In the next 18 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what this base is, how it remained hidden despite extensive Israeli and American surveillance of Syria, and why its existence represents a strategic fait accompli that changes the military balance in the Levant. This is information that was deliberately kept from public view by multiple governments for multiple reasons. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are examining is the physical manifestation of Iranian strategy that Western analysts said was impossible. Let's start with location because geography is destiny in military strategy. The base is positioned near the town of Kiswi, approximately 47 kilometers south of Damascus and 62 kilometers from the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. That positioning is deliberate and strategically brilliant. It is close enough to the Israeli border to support rapid deployment operations, but far enough to complicate Israeli strike planning. It is near major Syrian highway networks allowing ground force mobility while being distant from urban areas that would complicate defensive operations. The terrain is elevated plateau offering excellent visibility and defensibility. The site was previously a Syrian military facility that fell into disrepair after the civil war. Iranian forces did not seize new territory. They rehabilitated and massively expanded existing infrastructure in a way that minimized construction signatures that would have been visible from space during the building phase. According to analysis by ImageSat International and confirmed by intelligence sources speaking to Al Monitor, construction at the site began in October 2024 but was conducted using techniques designed to avoid detection. Earthworks and foundation preparation were done in phases that resembled agricultural development rather than military construction. Building materials were transported in small loads over many months rather than in obvious large convoys. Underground facilities were excavated using techniques that dispersed spoil material to avoid creating telltale mounds visible from satellite imagery. The result is a base that became operational in stages without triggering the pattern recognition algorithms that Israeli and American intelligence services use to identify new military facilities. By the time the facility was complete enough to be recognizable as a military installation, it was already hardened and defended in ways that make it difficult to destroy without sustained air campaigns. Subscribe if you are realizing that the assumption Israeli intelligence sees everything in Syria has just been proven false. Now let's examine what is actually at this facility. Announcement number 1, the hardened aircraft shelters indicate this is an airbase designed to support Iranian combat operations. And this one matters more than anything else because it means Iran has pre-positioned the infrastructure to conduct sustained air operations from Syrian territory without depending on vulnerable Syrian air bases. The 14 hardened aircraft shelters visible in satellite imagery are Type HAZ-2 designs identical to those used at Iranian airbases protecting high-value aircraft from airstrikes. Each shelter is constructed with reinforced concrete thick enough to withstand direct hits from conventional bombs up to 2,000 pounds. The shelters are configured for fighter-bomber aircraft with wingspans up to 14 meters, which corresponds to Iranian F-4 Phantom II or Su-24 Fencer Strike aircraft. Why does this matter? Because it gives Iran the ability to forward deploy strike aircraft within 62 kilometers of Israeli territory without keeping them at known Syrian airbases that Israel has struck repeatedly. The aircraft can remain protected in hardened shelters until needed, then launch strikes against Israeli or Jordanian targets with minimal warning time. The flight time from Kiswi to Jerusalem is approximately 6 minutes at combat speed. That leaves almost no time for defensive responses. According to former Israeli Air Force intelligence officer Colonel Ronen Bergman, writing in Yedioth Ahronoth, the existence of hardened shelters this close to Israeli territory represents what he called, and I am quoting directly, an intolerable strategic threat that Israel cannot permit to remain operational. But here is the problem. The base is now operational. The infrastructure is built, Destroying it requires dozens of strike sorties and would inevitably trigger Iranian retaliation. The cost of eliminating the threat now exceeds the cost that would have been required to prevent its construction. That is the definition of strategic fait accompli. By the time your adversary realizes what you have built, destroying it is more costly than accepting its existence. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2, the ammunition storage capacity indicates this base is designed to support major sustained operations, not limited strikes. This is the part that reveals the scale of Iranian ambitions. The 22 ammunition bunkers visible in satellite imagery are earth-covered magazines designed to store missiles, artillery rounds, and explosives in quantities sufficient to sustain high-intensity combat for extended periods. Each bunker appears to be approximately 40 meters long and 15 meters wide based on satellite measurements. Using standard Iranian military storage density calculations, each bunker can hold approximately 200 tons of munitions. 22 bunkers represent storage capacity of 4,400 tons of ammunition. To put that in perspective, during the 2006 Lebanon War, Hezbollah fired approximately 4,000 rockets over 34 days, using an estimated 2,000 tons of stored munitions. The storage capacity at Kiswi is sufficient to sustain rocket and missile operations at twice the intensity of the 2006 conflict for over a month. That is not a forward supply depot. That is a strategic ammunition reserve positioned to enable major military campaigns. According to reporting by the New York Times, citing U.S. intelligence officials, the bunkers contain a mix of Iranian-produced Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missiles with 300-kilometer range, Zelzal unguided rockets, and large quantities of artillery ammunition compatible with Syrian systems. The presence of Fateh 110 missiles is particularly significant because they are accurate enough to hit specific buildings rather than just area targets. Israeli population centers including Tel Aviv, Haifa, and Be'er Sheva are all within range of Fateh 110 missiles launched from Kisweh. Each missile carries a 500-kilogram high-explosive warhead capable of destroying reinforced structures. The quantity of missiles stored at the base is classified, but U.S. intelligence estimates suggest at least 80 to 120 missiles based on the number of specialized transport vehicles observed at the facility. Stay with me because this is where the strategic implications become impossible to ignore. Iran has not just positioned missiles near Israel. Iran has created the infrastructure to sustain missile campaigns that could overwhelm Israeli air defenses through sheer volume over time. Israel's Iron Dome system is effective against rockets and short-range missiles, but it has capacity limitations. Each Iron Dome battery carries 20 interceptor missiles and can engage approximately 10 to 15 targets before requiring reload. Israel operates approximately 10 Iron Dome batteries covering the entire country. That means the total ready intercept capacity at any moment is roughly 100 to 150 targets. If Iran launches coordinated salvos of 200-plus missiles from Syria, while Hezbollah simultaneously fires rockets from Lebanon, Israeli air defenses face a saturation scenario where not all incoming threats can be intercepted. Some will get through. The question is not whether Israeli defenses work. The question is whether they work well enough when facing the volume of fire that the Kiswi base enables. Announcement number 3, and this one confirms that the base is not an isolated outpost but part of an integrated Iranian military infrastructure across Syria. The communications facilities and command and control infrastructure visible at Kiswi indicate direct integration with Iranian command structures in Tehran and elsewhere in Syria. Satellite imagery shows multiple communications antenna arrays including satellite dishes configured for military communication satellites and what appear to be microwave relay towers oriented toward Damascus and toward the northeast, likely linking to other Iranian facilities in eastern Syria near the Iraqi border. This is not a standalone base operating with radio communication. This is a networked facility with redundant secure communication links. According to technical analysis by Jane's Defense, the configuration of communication systems at Kiswi is consistent with Iranian military doctrine for integrated air defense and missile operations. This allows the base to receive targeting data from Iranian intelligence networks, coordinate with other Iranian forces in Syria and Lebanon, and maintain direct communication with operational command centers in Tehran. The fiber optic communication infrastructure is particularly revealing. Fiber optic cables provide secure, jam-resistant communication that cannot be intercepted by standard signals intelligence systems. The fact that Iran invested in laying physical fiber optic connections from Kiswi to the broader Iranian network in Syria indicates this base is intended as a permanent strategic asset, not a temporary deployment. Think carefully about what this infrastructure represents. Iran has not just moved forces into Syria. Iran has built a networked military presence that operates with the same command and control architecture Iran uses domestically. This is not expeditionary forces borrowing Syrian facilities. This is Iranian sovereign military infrastructure on Syrian soil, received. That is announcement number 3. Now, let's talk about what is really happening behind the diplomatic statements because there are two stories and only one of them explains why this base exists and why it was kept secret. The official narrative from Iran and Syria is that Iranian forces are in Syria at the invitation of the Syrian government to fight terrorism. That narrative is technically true but fundamentally incomplete. The deeper story is that Iran is building permanent military infrastructure that extends its strategic reach to the Mediterranean and positions forces directly on Israel's border. This is not about fighting ISIS remnants. This is about fundamentally altering the military balance in the Levant in ways that make Iranian influence impossible to remove without major military campaigns that nobody has the will to conduct. Syria is a weak state that depends on Iranian and Russian support for survival. The Assad government cannot refuse Iranian requests to build military infrastructure even if it wanted to. The result is that Iran has effectively established sovereign military bases on Syrian territory with minimal constraints from the host government. Israel has known for years that Iranian forces operate in Syria. What Israel apparently did not know or chose not to act on was the scale and permanence of the infrastructure Iran was building. The Kiswi base represents a failure of intelligence, a failure of preemptive action, or a calculated decision by Israeli leadership that the cost of preventing the base was higher than the cost of accepting its existence. Prime Minister Ben-Gvir responded to the revelation of the Kiswi base by stating that Israel will not tolerate Iranian military infrastructure threatening our sovereignty and that all options remain on the table. That statement was released on May 17th. It does not notably change the fact that the base exists, is operational, and is defended by air defense systems that would exact heavy costs on any Israeli strike package. Think about the trap Israel now finds itself in. If Israel strikes the base, Iran retaliates with missile attacks on Israeli cities launched from that very base and from Lebanon. If Israel does not strike, the base remains operational and Iran continues building additional infrastructure. There is no cost-free option. That is the definition of strategic checkmate through infrastructure. If you are a Jordanian security planner, Iranian missiles 47 kilometers from your northern border is not a Syrian civil war story. It is a direct threat story. If you are an Israeli citizen, the existence of this base means the next conflict with Iran starts with missiles launched from Syrian territory within minutes of your home. If you are following regional security dynamics, this is evidence that Iran has won the competition for strategic position in Syria, regardless of what Western media narratives suggest. This pattern has repeated throughout history. During the Cold War, the Soviet Union established military bases in Cuba, 90 miles from the United States. American efforts to remove those bases through invasion planning, embargo, and covert operations all failed. The bases remained operational for decades until the Soviet Union itself collapsed. Geography and political will matter more than military capability when it comes to denying adversaries strategic positions. Iran has geographic access to Syria through Iraq. Iran has political alignment with the Syrian government that depends on Iranian support. Iran has demonstrated the will to invest billions of dollars in permanent infrastructure. Those three factors create a strategic reality that military strikes cannot easily change. So where does this leave us? Let me give you three clear paths because the middle ground has collapsed. Path 1, Israeli military strikes attempt to destroy the Kiswi base and other Iranian infrastructure in Syria. This triggers a multi-front war involving missile exchanges, Hezbollah attacks from Lebanon, and potential Iranian strikes from Iraq. The conflict escalates beyond anyone's ability to control. Regional war follows. Likelihood, higher than anyone wants to admit, but still below 50% because the costs are catastrophic for all parties. Path 2, tacit acceptance. Israel conducts limited strikes against specific high-value targets at Kiswi but does not attempt to destroy the entire facility. Iran rebuilds and reinforces. The base becomes a permanent feature of the strategic landscape. Both sides adjust to a new status quo with higher ambient threat levels but no immediate conflict. Likelihood, this is the most probable path. It allows both sides to avoid escalation while maintaining their core strategic positions. Path 3, diplomatic resolution. International pressure, possibly through Russia as mediator, results in agreements limiting Iranian military infrastructure in southern Syria in exchange for Israeli concessions elsewhere. Iran maintains presence but scales back the most threatening capabilities. Likelihood? Low. There is no indication any party has sufficient leverage or interest to broker such an agreement. I think we are on path 2 with periodic crises that push toward path 1 without quite triggering full escalation. The base exists. Israel will strike targets there when intelligence is actionable. Iran will rebuild and reinforce. This becomes the new normal. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, if Iran can build a major military base in Syria without Israeli or American intelligence preventing it, what does that say about the limits of surveillance and preemption? Second, when permanent military infrastructure is established, can it be removed through anything short of full-scale war? Third, at what point does strategic infrastructure become too costly to destroy and therefore must be accepted? Tell me in the comments whether you think Israel can afford to tolerate this base long term or whether conflict is inevitable. Tell me what you think Iran builds next now that the Kizwi model has proven successful. We will continue tracking every development at this facility and across Iranian strategic infrastructure in Syria, Iraq, and Lebanon. That is what this analysis does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this with everyone trying to understand how the strategic map of the Middle East is being redrawn through infrastructure rather than diplomacy. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update as this situation continues developing, and we will see you in the next analysis.